Hello everyone. It is even strange to talk about other vulnerabilities while everyone is so focused on vulnerabilities in Log4j. But life doesn't stop. Other vulnerabilities appear every day. And of course, there are many critical ones among them that require immediate patching. This episode will be about Microsoft Patch Tuesday for December 2021. I will traditionally use my open source Vulristics tool for analysis. I run Vulristics like this: Python 3.8, Vulristics Py, report type MS-Patch-Tuesday, MS-PT year 2021, MS-PT month December, rewrite flag true, and get a report. MS-Patch-Tuesday December 2021 report with comments text, image, HTML. Of course, everything was not entirely smooth. I had to make changes to the script for receiving comments from Tenable, a connector for Microsoft, and edit the detections of products and vulnerability types. There were 72 vulnerabilities in total. If you look at CVSS only, then 5 will be critical. According to my metric, there were no critical vulnerabilities. This is primarily because there were no vulnerabilities with public exploits. It was not possible to clearly define the type for one vulnerability. I left it as it is. Insufficient data validation can mean anything. The most critical vulnerability is spoofing in Windows AppX installer, CV 2021 43890. AppX installer is used to install AppX apps on Windows 10 systems. It has been linked to attacks associated with the Emotted, Trickbot, Baseloader family. To exploit this vulnerability, an attacker would need to convince a user to open a malicious attachment, for example through a phishing attack. It seems that code execution would occur at the logged-on user level, so attackers would likely combine this with another bug to take control of a system. The next most critical vulnerability is remote code execution in ISNS server, CV 2021 43215. Quote, this patch fixed a bug in the Internet Storage Name Service, ISNS, server that could allow remote code execution if an attacker sends a specifically created request to an affected server. If you are running a SAN in your enterprise, you either have an ISNS server or you configure each of the logical interfaces individually. Further, the prioritization is not so obvious. Remote code execution in Windows encrypting file system, CV 2021 43217. An attacker could cause a buffer overflow write, leading to unauthenticated, non-sandboxed code execution. End of quote. It looks interesting, but the real exploitability is questionable. Remote code execution in Windows Remote Desktop Client, CV 2021 43233. Quote, Microsoft rated this exploitation more likely. Exploiting this flaw would require a vulnerable target to connect to a malicious RDP server. Successful exploitation would allow an attacker to execute arbitrary code on the machine of the connected client. Remote code execution in Microsoft SharePoint, CV 2021 42309. Quote, the vulnerability allows a user to elevate and execute code in the context of the server's account. An attacker would need manage lists permissions on a SharePoint site, but by default, any authorized user can create their own new site where they have full permissions. This bug allows an attacker to bypass the restriction against running arbitrary server-side web controls. Remote code execution in Microsoft Office, CV 2021 43905. Quote, to exploit this vulnerability, an attacker would have to create a malicious Microsoft Office document and convince a user through social engineering to open the document. Microsoft says that the preview pane is not an attack vector, which means exploitation requires opening the document, not merely previewing it. And this one is my favorite. Remote code execution in Microsoft 4K wireless display adapter. Microsoft is not only a software vendor, sometimes they also have vulnerabilities in their hardware. Quote, this update fixes a vulnerability that could allow an unauthenticated attacker to execute their code on an affected device. The attacker would need to be on the same network as the Microsoft 4K display adapter. If they are, they could send specially crafted packets to the affected device. Patching this won't be easy. To be protected, users need to install the Microsoft Wireless Display Adapter application from the Microsoft Store onto a system connected to the Microsoft 4K Wireless Display Adapter. Only then can they use the Update and Security section of the app to download the latest firmware to mitigate this bug. Yet another elevation of privilege in Windows Print Spooler, CVE 2021 41-333. Exploitation more likely. Quote, given the mass exploitation of prior print spooler vulnerabilities, users should apply these patches as soon as possible. Elevation of privilege in Windows Installer, CVE 2021 43-883. Quote, to exploit this vulnerability, an attacker would need to convince the target to open a specifically crafted installer in order to gain elevated privileges. And finally, I would like to note the memory corruption in Microsoft Edge, CVE 2021 4102. This is a very low priority vulnerability. However, the description has, quote, Google is aware of wrappers that an exploit for CVE 2021 4102 exists in the wild, end of quote. However, for some reason, Microsoft doesn't specify exploitability in the wild for this vulnerability, as they do it for other vulnerabilities. It's a pity. And that's it for today. Please subscribe and leave your comments. Bye.